The dust had barely settled on Isaac O'Connor's boots when he saw her standing at the church steps, shoulders slumped in defeat, and something in his chest cracked open like dried earth finally receiving rain. She was turning away from the white chapel, its paint peeling under the harsh Colorado sun, her dark hair escaping from beneath a worn bonnet. The church door had just closed behind her with a finality that echoed across Central City's Main Street. It was Sunday morning in the summer of 1878, and Isaac had been riding through this mining town for 3 days straight, looking for work and finding nothing but closed doors and suspicious glances. He was a drifter, a cowboy without a herd to drive, a man whose loneliness had become as familiar as the weight of his pistol on his hip. But something about the way she stood there, her hand still raised as if the door might reopen if she just wished hard enough, made him pull his horse to a stop. He watched as she pressed her palm against the white wood, her whole body trembling with what looked like either grief or fury or both. Then she turned, and Isaac saw her face fully for the first time. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with olive skin that spoke of mixed heritage and eyes so dark they looked black in the morning light. Her dress was threadbare but clean, and there was a dignity in the way she held herself, even as tears streaked down her cheeks. She started walking down the steps, her movements stiff and mechanical, as if she were forcing her body to cooperate against its will. Isaac dismounted without thinking, his worn boots hitting the dirt road with a soft thud. He had no plan, no idea what he was going to say, but his legs carried him forward anyway. She did not notice him at first, too lost in her own pain, but when she reached the bottom step and nearly collided with him, her eyes snapped up with a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Madam," Isaac said, removing his hat instinctively. His voice came out rougher than he intended, gravelly from days without much conversation. "I could not help but notice you seemed troubled." She stepped back, her hand going to her throat in a defensive gesture. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her face, the kind that came from carrying burdens too heavy for one person. "I am fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. "Does not look fine to me," Isaac said gently. He glanced at the church behind her, then back at her face. "They turn you away," her jaw tightened, and for a moment he thought she might snap at him or simply walk away. Instead, something seemed to break inside her. "They said I was not welcome," she whispered. "Said my kind does not belong in their house of God." Isaac felt anger rise in his chest, hot and immediate. He had seen this before, had witnessed the cruelty that people inflicted on each other in the name of righteousness. "Their house maybe," he said. "But it is supposed to be God's house, and I reckon he has different ideas about who belongs." She studied him with those dark eyes, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because some of the tension left her shoulders. "You are kind to say so, but it does not change anything. I came here looking for grace, for forgiveness, and instead I found only judgment." Isaac looked around the quiet street. Most of the townspeople were inside the church now, their horses tied to posts, their voices rising in hymns that drifted through the closed windows. He thought about his own relationship with prayer, which had been complicated at best over the years. He had prayed when his parents died of fever. He had prayed when he lost his ranch to debt. He had prayed during the war and after it, and through all the lonely nights that followed. Sometimes he felt like God listened. Most times he did not know. But standing here in front of this woman with tears on her face and pain in her eyes, Isaac knew exactly what he needed to do. "Pray with me," he said suddenly. She blinked at him, confusion replacing the grief for a moment. "What? Pray with me," he repeated, more firmly this time. "Right here, right now. You came looking for grace, and you deserve to find it. If they would not give you a place to pray inside, then we will make our own place out here." "You do not even know me," she said, but there was something hopeful creeping into her voice. "No, I do not," Isaac admitted. "But I know what it is like to feel unwanted. I know what it is like to search for something that keeps slipping through your fingers, and I know that no church has the right to keep anyone from God." She looked at him for a long moment, then at the church, then back at him. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she nodded. "All right." Isaac took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm that spoke of hard work, and led her away from the church steps. They walked to the edge of the street where a large cottonwood tree provided shade, its leaves rustling in the dry breeze. He gestured for her to sit on a weathered bench beneath the tree, and he sat beside her, their hands still clasped. "I am not much of a preacher," Isaac said, "but I will do my best. Would you bow your head with me?" She did, closing her eyes, and Isaac found himself staring at her face for a moment before closing his own eyes. He had not prayed aloud with another person in years, not since his mother had passed, and the words felt strange and awkward in his mouth at first. "Lord," he began, "we come to you not in a building made of wood and stone, but under the sky you created, beneath a tree you grew. We come as we are, broken and searching, hoping for your grace. This woman beside me, whose name I do not even know yet, she came seeking you today and found only closed doors. But I believe you keep your doors open always, that your love is bigger than any church and stronger than any judgment." He paused, searching for the right words. Beside him, he could hear her breathing, soft and steady. "She needs your grace, Lord. We both do. We need to know that we are not forgotten, not abandoned, not cast aside. We need to know that our mistakes do not define us, that there is still hope for redemption and love and belonging. I pray that you would show her your mercy, that you would help her find the peace she is searching for. And I pray that you would guide both of us toward whatever it is we are meant to find in this place." Isaac felt a strange warmth in his chest as he spoke, as if something were loosening inside him. He squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back. "In your name we pray," he finished. "Amen." "Amen," she echoed softly. They sat in silence for a moment, neither of them opening their eyes or letting go of the other's hand. The hymns from the church continued in the background, but they seemed distant now, less important. Finally, she opened her eyes and looked at him with such raw gratitude that Isaac felt his breath catch. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea what that meant to me." "I think I have some idea," Isaac replied. He released her hand slowly, already missing the warmth of her touch. "I am Isaac O'Connor. Rebecca Emerson," she said, "though most people call me Rose." "Rose," Isaac repeated, liking the way it sounded. "That is a beautiful name." She smiled for the first time, and it transformed her entire face. "My mother called me that because she said I bloomed in the harshest conditions." "Sounds like she knew you well." Rose's smile faded slightly. "She died 3 years ago. My father passed when I was young. I have been on my own since." Isaac nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "I lost my parents too. Fever took them both when I was 17. Been drifting ever since, trying to find a place that feels like home." "Have you found it?" Rose asked. "Not yet," Isaac admitted. "Though I am starting to think maybe home is not a place at all. Maybe it is something else entirely." They talked for over an hour beneath that cottonwood tree, sharing stories and sorrows with the ease of people who had nothing left to lose. Rose told him about her mother, who had been Mexican and had married Rose's father, an Irish immigrant, against both families' wishes. She told him about growing up caught between two worlds, never quite fitting into either, always feeling like an outsider. She told him about coming to Central City 6 months ago, hoping to start fresh, only to find that prejudice followed her everywhere she went. Isaac told her about his ranch, lost to gambling debts his father had accumulated. He told her about the war, though he kept the darkest parts to himself. He told her about the years of drifting, working as a ranch hand here, a hired gun there, never staying long enough to put down roots. He told her about the loneliness that had become his constant companion, the feeling that he was always searching for something just beyond his reach. When the church service ended and people began streaming out onto the street, Rose tensed, preparing to face their judgment again. But Isaac stood and offered her his arm. "Walk with me," he said. She hesitated only a moment before taking his arm, and they walked together down Central City's main street with their heads held high. People stared, some with curiosity, others with disapproval, but Isaac met every gaze steadily until they looked away. He could feel Rose trembling slightly beside him, but she did not falter. They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to rolling hills dotted with mining operations. The mountains rose in the distance, still capped with snow despite the summer heat. It was beautiful country, wild and untamed, full of possibility. "Why did you help me?" Rose asked suddenly. "You risked your reputation in this town, such as it is, by standing with me." Isaac considered the question. He could have given her a simple answer, something about Christian charity or basic human decency. But standing there with her, looking out at the endless Colorado landscape, he found himself being honest in a way he rarely was. "Because when I saw you at those church steps," he said slowly, "I saw myself. I saw every time I have felt rejected, every door that has closed in my face, every moment I have wondered if I was worth anything at all. And I thought if I could help you find even a small piece of grace, maybe I could find some for myself too." Rose turned to look at him, her dark eyes shining with unshed tears. "You are a good man, Isaac O'Connor." "I am trying to be," he said. They stood there in comfortable silence, and Isaac realized that, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not feel lonely. The constant ache that had lived in his chest for years seemed to have eased, replaced by something warmer and more hopeful. "I should probably find somewhere to stay," Isaac said eventually. "I was planning to move on from Central City today, but now I think I might stay a while longer. If you would like the company, that is." Rose smiled. "I would like that very much. There is a boarding house on the north end of town. The woman who runs it is kind, or at least kinder than most. She might have a room available." "Will you show me?" Isaac asked. "Of course." They walked back into town together, and Isaac felt something shifting in his chest, like a door opening onto a room he had forgotten existed. He did not know what would happen next, did not know if this connection he felt with Rose was real or just the product of two lonely people finding each other at the right moment. But for the first time in years, he wanted to stay somewhere long enough to find out. The boarding house Rose led him to was a two-story structure painted a faded yellow, with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. A hand-painted sign read, "Mrs. Patterson's Rooms," in neat letters. Rose knocked on the door, and a moment later it opened to reveal a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes. "Rose," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "Good to see you, dear. Who is your friend?" "This is Isaac O'Connor," Rose said. "He is looking for a room, Mrs." Patterson looked Isaac up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen her share of drifters and troublemakers. Whatever she saw must have passed muster, because she nodded and stepped aside. Come in. I have one room available on the second floor. $3 a week includes breakfast and supper. No drinking, no fighting, no women in the rooms after dark." She glanced at Rose with a knowing look, and Rose blushed. Isaac found himself fighting back a smile. "That sounds fair, madam," Isaac said. "I will take it." He paid for 2 weeks upfront, most of what he had left in his pockets, and Mrs. Patterson showed him to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. It was not much, but it was more than he had had in months. After Mrs. Patterson left, Rose lingered in the doorway. "I should go," she said. "Let you get settled." "Where are you staying?" Isaac asked. "I have a room here too," Rose admitted. "Down the hall. Mrs. Patterson was one of the few people who would rent to me when I first arrived." "Then I will see you at supper." "Yes," Rose said, and the smile that lit up her face made Isaac's heart do something strange in his chest. After she left, Isaac sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. He had ridden into Central City, expecting to pass through like he had passed through 100 other towns. Instead, he had found himself praying with a beautiful stranger beneath a cottonwood tree, and now he was planning to stay. It was impulsive and probably foolish, but it also felt more right than anything had felt in a very long time. He spent the afternoon washing up and tending to his horse, which he stabled at the livery at the end of the street. The stable hand was a young kid, maybe 16, who looked at Isaac with the kind of awe that cowboys sometimes inspired in boys. "You planning on staying in Central City, mister?" the boy asked. "For a while," Isaac said. "There is work at some of the mines if you are looking. They are always needing men who are not afraid of hard labor." Isaac thanked him for the information, though the thought of working underground made his skin crawl. He had spent too many years under open skies to relish the idea of being trapped in dark tunnels. But he would do what he needed to do to earn his keep. Supper at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a lively affair. There were 6 other boarders besides Isaac and Rose, mostly miners and one traveling salesman. The food was simple but good. Beef stew and fresh bread, and the conversation flowed easily around the table. Isaac noticed that some of the men cast curious glances at Rose, but Mrs. Patterson ran a tight ship, and no one said anything inappropriate. After the meal, as the others drifted off to their rooms or out to the saloons, Isaac found himself alone with Rose on the front porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the air had finally cooled to something bearable. "Tell me about your work," Isaac said. "How do you support yourself here?" Rose looked down at her hands. "I take in laundry mostly, some mending and sewing when I can get it. It is not much, but it keeps me fed and gives me enough for the rent." "That is honest work," Isaac said. "Honest but exhausting," Rose admitted. "And sometimes I wonder if it is enough, if I will always be scrambling just to survive, or if there might be something more." "What would you want if you could have anything?" Isaac asked. Rose was quiet for a moment, considering. "I would want a home," she said finally. "A real home, with land and maybe some animals. A place where I could grow things, where I could wake up every morning and know that I belonged there. And I would want people around me who cared, who saw me as more than just the color of my skin or where my parents came from." "That does not sound like too much to ask for," Isaac said. "No, but it feels impossible sometimes," Rose said. She turned to look at him. "What about you? What do you want?" Isaac thought about it. He had spent so many years just trying to get by, to survive from one day to the next, that he had almost forgotten how to dream about the future. "I want what you want," he said slowly. "A place to belong, people who matter. Maybe someone to share it all with so the loneliness does not eat me alive." Their eyes met, and Isaac felt that strange warmth in his chest again, stronger this time. Rose reached out and took his hand, her fingers threading through his. "Maybe we can help each other find those things," she said softly. "Maybe we can," Isaac agreed. They sat together on that porch until the stars came out, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Isaac told her stories from his years on the trail, carefully editing out the violence and danger, focusing instead on the beauty he had seen and the interesting people he had met. Rose told him about her dreams, about wanting to open a dress shop someday where she could use her sewing skills to create beautiful things, instead of just repairing other people's worn-out clothes. When Mrs. Patterson finally came out and pointedly cleared her throat, reminding them of the house rules, they reluctantly said good night. Isaac climbed the stairs to his room feeling lighter than he had in years, and he fell asleep with a smile on his face. The next morning, Isaac went looking for work. He started at the mines, but after taking one look at the dark shafts descending into the earth and the exhausted faces of the men emerging from them, he knew he could not do it. Instead, he found work at the general store, loading and unloading freight wagons. It was hard physical labor, but at least it was above ground and in the open air. The store owner, a German immigrant named Mr. Hoffman, was gruff but fair. He paid Isaac a decent wage and did not ask too many questions about his past. Isaac quickly proved himself reliable, showing up early and working hard, and within a week Mr. Hoffman was trusting him with more responsibilities. Every evening, Isaac would return to the boarding house, wash up, and spend time with Rose. They fell into an easy routine, eating supper together, then walking through town or sitting on the porch talking. Mrs. Patterson watched them with knowing eyes but said nothing, though Isaac caught her smiling more than once. As the days turned into weeks, Isaac found himself falling for Rose in a way he had never fallen for anyone before. It was not just her beauty, though she was certainly beautiful. It was the strength in her, the resilience that had kept her going through hardship after hardship. It was her kindness, the way she always had a smile for the children who ran through the streets or a kind word for the other boarders. It was the way she listened when he talked, really listened, as if his words mattered. And it was the way she looked at him, with eyes that saw past all his defenses to the lonely man beneath, and did not turn away. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a month after they had met, Isaac asked Rose to go on a ride with him. He borrowed a gentle mare from the livery, and they rode out of town together into the surrounding hills. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, all rocky outcrops and sparse vegetation, with the mountains looming in the distance. They found a spot beside a small creek, one of the few water sources in the area, and dismounted to let the horses drink. Rose walked to the water's edge and knelt down, trailing her fingers through the clear water. "It is peaceful out here," she said, "away from all the stares and whispers." Isaac sat down beside her. "Does it still bother you, what people say?" "Sometimes," Rose admitted. "I try not to let it, but it is hard. I keep hoping that if I just work hard enough, if I am kind enough and good enough, people will see past their prejudices, but most of them never will." "Their loss," Isaac said firmly. "You are the best person I have met in this town, maybe the best person I have met in years. If they are too blind to see that, it says more about them than it does about you." Rose turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I know it," Isaac said. He reached out and cupped her face gently in his hand, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. "Rose, you are remarkable. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and I feel lucky every single day that I happened to ride through Central City when I did." "Isaac," Rose whispered, and then she was leaning forward and kissing him. It was a soft kiss at first, tentative and questioning, but when Isaac responded by pulling her closer, it deepened into something more urgent. All the loneliness and longing that both of them had been carrying for so long seemed to pour into that kiss, transforming into something bright and hopeful. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I probably have been since that first morning at the church. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I cannot deny what I feel." "Then do not deny it," Rose said, "because I am falling in love with you too. You changed my life that morning, Isaac. You showed me that there was still kindness in the world, still people who would stand beside me instead of turning away. And every day since, you have proven that you are exactly the man I thought you were." They stayed by the creek for hours, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Isaac told Rose that he wanted to marry her, wanted to build that home she had dreamed about. Rose told him that she had given up hoping for such things until he had come along, but now she believed again. As the sun began to set and they rode back toward town, Isaac felt a contentment he had never known. The loneliness that had defined his life for so long had been replaced by something infinitely better: connection and love and purpose. But when they reached Central City and rode down the main street, they were met with hostile stares. A group of men were gathered outside the saloon, and as Isaac and Rose passed, one of them called out, "Heard you have been stepping out with that half-breed girl, O'Connor," the man said. He was big and bearded with mean eyes. "Folks around here do not take kindly to that sort of thing." Isaac felt Rose tense beside him, but he kept his voice calm. "My personal life is none of your concern. It is when you are disrespecting decent white women by consorting with her kind," another man said. Isaac's temper flared, hot and immediate. He dismounted in one smooth motion, his hand hovering near his pistol. "That is enough. You do not know what you are talking about, and you have no right to speak about her that way." "We have every right," the first man said, stepping forward. "This is a respectable town, and we do not need your type bringing it down." "My type," Isaac said dangerously. "And what type is that exactly? Outsiders, drifters, men with no roots and no loyalty who do not care about the community." Rose dismounted and put a hand on Isaac's arm. "Let it go," she said softly. "They are not worth it." But Isaac could not let it go. He had spent too many years watching people like Rose be mistreated, had carried too much anger about the injustices of the world. "No," he said. "I am tired of letting it go. I am tired of watching good people be treated like they are less than human just because of who their parents were or where they came from." He turned to address the crowd that had gathered. "Rose Emerson is one of the finest people in this town. She works harder than most of you. She is kinder than most of you, and she has more integrity in her little finger than some of you have in your whole bodies. If you cannot see that, if all you can see is the color of her skin, then you are fools. And I will not stand by and let you insult her." There was a tense silence. The bearded man looked like he wanted to start a fight, but Isaac's reputation as a former cowboy and the gun on his hip gave him pause. Finally, the man spat in the dirt and turned away. "You will regret this, O'Connor," he muttered. As the crowd dispersed, Isaac turned to Rose. She was looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "That was dangerous," she said. "You have made enemies now." "I already had enemies," Isaac said. "Anyone who would treat you badly was never going to be my friend anyway." They walked the horses to the livery, and Isaac noticed that Rose was unusually quiet. When they reached the boarding house, she stopped him before they went inside. "Isaac, I need you to understand something," she said. "This is not the first time I have faced this kind of hostility, and it will not be the last. If you stay with me, if we build a life together, there will always be people who disapprove. It will be hard and it might be dangerous. I need to know that you are prepared for that." Isaac took both her hands in his. "Rose, I have spent my whole life drifting from place to place, never finding anywhere that felt like home. I was lonely and lost, going through the motions of living without ever really feeling alive. Then I met you, and everything changed. You gave me purpose, you gave me hope, you gave me a reason to stop running. Whatever challenges come our way, we will face them together. I am not afraid." Rose searched his face, and whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she nodded. "All right, together then." "Together," Isaac agreed. The next few weeks tested that promise. Word of Isaac's confrontation with the men outside the saloon spread through town, and suddenly, he and Rose found themselves even more isolated than before. Some of the stores refused to serve them. People crossed the street to avoid walking near them. Isaac lost his job at the general store when Mr. Hoffman's other customers threatened to take their business elsewhere if he kept employing that man who was causing trouble. But there were also unexpected moments of kindness. Mrs. Patterson not only continued to rent them rooms, but also became a fierce defender, refusing to tolerate any negative talk about them in her boarding house. The stable hand at the livery, a boy named Tom, always made sure Isaac's horse was well cared for and often slipped him information about who might be hiring. And there was a Chinese family who ran a small restaurant on the edge of town who welcomed them warmly. Having faced similar prejudice themselves, Isaac found work as a ranch hand at a small spread outside of town. The owner, an older man named Mr. Davis whose own son had died in the war, did not care about Isaac's relationship with Rose. He just cared that Isaac knew how to work. The pay was modest, but it was steady, and Isaac threw himself into the work with determination. In the evenings, after long days of labor, Isaac would return to town and spend every moment he could with Rose. They began to plan seriously for their future, saving every penny they could toward buying a piece of land where they could build their own home. On a crisp September evening, 3 months after they had first met, Isaac took Rose back to the cottonwood tree where they had prayed together. The leaves were beginning to turn gold, and the setting sun cast everything in warm light. "This is where it all began," Isaac said. "Where I first took your hand and asked you to pray with me." "I remember," Rose said softly. "It was the moment my life changed." Isaac knelt down on one knee, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. He had saved for weeks to buy it, and it was not much, but it was real gold and it was meant to last. "Rose Emerson," he said, "you are my grace. You are the answer to prayers I did not know how to pray. You took my loneliness and transformed it into love. You took my aimlessness and gave me purpose. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice in loving me. Will you marry me?" Rose's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling wider than he had ever seen. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "I love you," Isaac said. "I will always love you." "I love you too," Rose replied. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony held at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. The local pastor had refused to marry them, but Mrs. Patterson knew a traveling preacher who was willing to perform the ceremony. There were only a handful of guests, the other boarders, Mr. Davis from the ranch, the Chinese family from the restaurant, and young Tom from the livery, but it did not matter. What mattered was the way Isaac looked at Rose as she walked down the stairs in a simple white dress she had sewn herself, like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. What mattered was the way their voices shook with emotion as they said their vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life brought. What mattered was that two lonely people had found each other and decided to stop being lonely together. Mrs. Patterson gave them a larger room on the second floor as a wedding gift, one with space for a table and chairs in addition to the bed. It was not much, but it was theirs, and they made it home. Rose hung curtains she had sewn in the window, and Isaac built a small shelf where they could keep their few books and treasures. They settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Isaac continued working at the ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning after sunset, his body aching but his heart full. Rose continued taking in laundry and sewing, her skilled fingers working late into the night. Every penny they earned went into the jar they kept hidden beneath the floorboards, slowly accumulating toward their dream. Winter came to Central City with a vengeance, bringing bitter cold and snow that piled up in the streets. The mines slowed production, and many of the seasonal workers left town. But Isaac and Rose stayed, huddled together in their room during the long, cold nights, talking about the future they would build. "I was thinking," Rose said one evening as they lay in bed, "that when we get our land I would like to have chickens, and maybe a cow if we can afford it." "Chickens and a cow," Isaac repeated, smiling in the darkness. "What else?" "A garden, definitely. I want to grow vegetables and herbs." "And flowers, lots of flowers. Roses, of course." "Of course," Isaac said, kissing her forehead. "Anything else?" "Children," Rose said softly. "Someday when we are ready I would like to have children, a whole house full of them, filling up the space with laughter and noise." Isaac's heart swelled. He had not allowed himself to think about children before, had not thought he would ever have a stable enough life to be a father. But with Rose, anything seemed possible. "How many is a houseful?" he asked. "I do not know. 3, 4, however many God blesses us with." "Then that is what we will have," Isaac promised. "A house full of children and chickens and flowers and you and me in the middle of it all, still holding hands after 50 years. 50 years, Rose murmured. "I like the sound of that." Spring came slowly to Central City, the snow melting in fits and starts. As the weather warmed, Isaac and Rose began actively looking for land to purchase. They rode out every Sunday after church, which they now held privately in their room since the main church still refused them entry, exploring the surrounding area. It was on one of these rides that they found it, a small parcel of land about 5 miles outside of town, nestled in a valley with a stream running through it. There were maybe 20 acres total, enough for a house and a barn, with room for animals and a garden. The previous owners had abandoned it when they failed to find gold on the property, and it was being sold for back taxes. Isaac and Rose stood in the middle of the property, turning in slow circles, and both of them felt it at the same time. This was home. "We could build the house there," Rose said, pointing to a slight rise that would give them a view of the mountains, "and put the barn down closer to the water. There is enough flat land for your garden," Isaac added, "and maybe a small orchard in a few years once we have the rest established." They went directly from the property to the land office, where they carefully counted out the money they had saved. It was almost exactly what they needed, with just a few dollars left over. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, looked at them with surprise when they said they wanted to buy the abandoned parcel. "That land is not worth much," he said. "No gold, poor soil, too far from town to be convenient." "It is perfect for us," Rose said firmly. The man shrugged and drew up the papers. When Isaac signed his name and then Rose signed hers, both of them trembled with excitement. They owned land. They had a place to build their future. The next months were the hardest work of Isaac's life, but also the most satisfying. He continued working at the ranch during the week to earn money for supplies, then spent every spare moment building on their land. Mr. Davis, who had grown fond of Isaac, often let him borrow tools and sometimes came out to help with the bigger jobs. Rose worked alongside Isaac whenever she could, her determination matching his. She helped dig the foundation, held boards steady while Isaac nailed them in place, and spent hours mixing mortar for the stone chimney they were building. Her hands became rough and calloused, and she developed muscles she had never had before, but she had never been happier. Mrs. Patterson and some of the other friends they had made in town would come out on Sundays to help and to bring food. Young Tom brought his older brothers, strong young men who could lift beams that would have taken Isaac hours to position alone. The Chinese family, whose name was Wang, brought their adult children who helped with the roof. By late summer, the house was finished. It was small, just 3 rooms, a main living area with the kitchen, a bedroom, and a small extra room that Rose said would be perfect for a nursery someday. But it was solid and well built, with a stone fireplace and real glass windows that Rose had insisted on. The barn went up quickly after that, and by fall they had moved out of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house and into their own home. They bought 2 chickens from a neighbor, and Mr. Davis gave them a milk cow as a housewarming gift. Rose planted a garden, even though it was late in the season, determined to have at least something growing on their land before winter came. Their first night in the house, they lay in their bed, listening to the sounds of the country around them, the wind in the trees, the creek burbling in the distance, an owl hooting somewhere nearby. "We did it," Rose whispered. "We actually did it." "We did," Isaac agreed, pulling her close. And this is just the beginning. As fall turned to winter, Isaac and Rose settled into the rhythms of their new life. Isaac had left his job at the ranch to focus on their own land, and while money was tighter, they were getting by. He did odd jobs for neighboring ranchers and occasionally hired himself out for short-term work. Rose continued her sewing and laundry business, and found that she had more clients now that she was out of town, and people did not have to be seen publicly associating with her. On a cold December morning, Rose woke feeling ill. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea continued day after day, always worse in the mornings, she began to suspect the truth. When her monthly courses did not come, she knew for certain. She waited until evening to tell Isaac, wanting the moment to be right. They were sitting by the fire after supper, Isaac reading from the newspaper he had brought back from town, when Rose reached over and took his hand. "Isaac," she said, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately concerned. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Rose said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I am expecting a baby." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her, processing the words. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the chickens. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Rose confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "When? How are you feeling? Do you need to see a doctor? Should you be working so hard?" "Slow down," Rose said, still laughing. "I am fine, truly. The baby should come in the summer, probably July. And yes, I will see a doctor when I go to town next week." Isaac was immediately protective, insisting that Rose rest more and take on fewer chores. She rolled her eyes at his fussing but secretly loved how much he cared. As her belly began to swell with their child, Isaac would spend long minutes just staring at her in wonder, his hand resting on the curve of her stomach, feeling for kicks. The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Rose was exhausted and queasy for the first few months. By spring, she felt better and threw herself into preparing for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, transforming the small third room into a nursery. Isaac built a cradle, carefully sanding and finishing the wood until it was smooth as silk. On a hot July afternoon, Rose's labor began. Isaac rode like mad to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Riley who lived on a neighboring property. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Isaac paced outside the bedroom door, driven nearly mad with worry by Rose's cries of pain. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard a new sound, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. A moment later, Mrs. Riley opened the door, smiling widely. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy. Your wife is tired but doing well." Isaac rushed into the room, not even hearing Mrs. Riley's instructions about letting Rose rest. Rose was propped up in bed, looking exhausted and radiant at the same time, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "Isaac," she said softly, "come meet your son." He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside the bed, looking down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and Rose's coloring, and when he opened his eyes, they were a deep blue that might turn brown or might stay blue, impossible to tell yet. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You are both perfect. What should we name him?" Rose asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Looking at his son's face, Isaac suddenly knew. "Gabriel," he said. "It means God is my strength, and he is he not? Our strength, our blessing, the proof that grace is real." "Gabriel," Rose repeated, testing it out. "Gabriel O'Connor. I love it." Over the next weeks, their lives revolved around the tiny person who had entered their world. Gabriel was a good baby, only fussy when he was hungry or needed changing, and he seemed to grow bigger every day. Isaac could not get enough of him, spending hours just watching him sleep or trying to coax smiles from him. As summer turned to fall and Gabriel grew from a newborn into an increasingly alert infant, Isaac and Rose marveled at how their lives had changed. 2 years ago, Isaac had been a lonely drifter and Rose had been a woman rejected by her community. Now they had a home, a family, and a love that seemed to grow deeper every day. The prejudice they faced had not disappeared, but it mattered less now. They had built their own community of people who valued them for who they were. Mr. Davis was like a grandfather to Gabriel, constantly bringing gifts and telling stories. Mrs. Patterson made the trip out from town regularly to visit, bringing treats and news. The Wung family came for dinner once a month, and their children played with Gabriel, making him shriek with laughter. On a crisp October morning, Isaac was working on repairs to the barn when he heard a horse approaching. He looked up to see a well-dressed man riding toward the house. Something about the man's bearing suggested he was someone of importance, and Isaac felt a flutter of worry. Official-looking people rarely brought good news. The man dismounted and introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, a lawyer from Denver. "I am looking for Rose Emerson," he said. "Or Rose O'Connor, as I understand she is now called." "That is my wife," Isaac said carefully. "What is this about?" "I have been trying to locate her for several months," Mr. Harrison said. "It is regarding an inheritance." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "An inheritance?" Rose appeared on the porch, drawn by the sound of voices with Gabriel on her hip. When Mr. Harrison explained who he was and why he had come, she looked stunned. "My mother had a brother," Rose said slowly. "My uncle Miguel, but I have not seen him since I was a child. My father's family cut us off when he married my mother, and her family was never wealthy." "Your uncle Miguel never married and had no children," Mr. Harrison explained. When he died 6 months ago, he left his entire estate to you, his only living relative. It includes a ranch in New Mexico territory and a substantial sum of money. Rose sat down heavily on the porch steps, nearly dropping Gabriel in her shock. Isaac took the baby from her and listened as Mr. Harrison explained the details. The ranch was sizable, several hundred acres with a functioning cattle operation. Miguel had done well for himself, and he had wanted his niece to benefit from his success. "How much money?" Isaac asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "After all debts and expenses are settled, approximately $15,000, Mr. Harrison said. It was more money than Isaac had seen in his entire life. He and Rose looked at each other, both of them speechless. Over the next weeks, as they dealt with the legal paperwork and tried to decide what to do with this unexpected windfall, Isaac and Rose had long discussions about their future. The money meant they could expand their ranch, buy more animals, perhaps hire help. Or they could move to New Mexico and take over Miguel's ranch, starting over in a new place. In the end, they decided to stay in Colorado. This was where they had found each other, where they had built their home with their own hands. The ranch in New Mexico they would sell, but they would use the money to secure their future here. They bought more land, expanding their property to over 100 acres. They purchased a small herd of cattle and several horses. Isaac hired 2 ranch hands, young men who needed work and did not care about Isaac and Rose's mixed marriage. They expanded the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Rose set up a proper sewing room where she could work on the dress designs she had always dreamed of creating. Life was not perfect. There were still people in Central City who looked at them with disdain, still moments when Rose faced cruel words or Isaac had to defend their family's right to exist. But they had each other, they had Gabriel, and they had a home that was truly theirs. On Gabriel's first birthday, they threw a party. All their friends came, bringing gifts and food, and the house was full of laughter and joy. As Isaac looked around at the gathering, at Rose playing with Gabriel while Mrs. Patterson looked on adoringly at Mr. Davis telling exaggerated stories to Tom and the Wung children, he felt a contentment so profound it almost hurt. That evening, after everyone had left and Gabriel was asleep in his crib, Isaac and Rose sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Rose was pregnant again, just barely starting to show, and Isaac kept his hand resting on her stomach. "You remember that day at the church?" Rose asked. "When you stopped and asked me to pray with you, every detail," Isaac said. "The way you looked, the tears on your face, the way my heart knew before my head did that you were going to change my life." "I was so lost that day," Rose said. "I felt like I had been rejected by everyone and everything, even God. And then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had been too hurt to pray. You told me I deserved grace and you helped me find it. We found it together," Isaac said. "I was just as lost as you were, just as lonely. You gave me grace too." "We gave it to each other," Rose said. She turned to look at him, her dark eyes full of love, "and we built a whole life out of it." "The best life," Isaac agreed. He leaned over and kissed her softly. "I love you, Rose O'Connor. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." "I love you too," Rose said. "My lonely cowboy who stopped when everyone else walked by, who saw me when I felt invisible, who gave me the grace I needed to believe in myself again." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched over them that first night when they had prayed together beneath the cottonwood tree. So much had changed since then, but the most important thing remained the same. They had each other. The second baby, a daughter they named Anna, arrived the following spring. She had Isaac's red hair and Rose's dark eyes, a beautiful combination that made strangers do double takes. Gabriel was enchanted with his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. As the years passed, the O'Connor ranch prospered. Isaac's hard work and Rose's careful management meant they were soon one of the more successful small operations in the area. They added sheep to their cattle, and Rose started a small business breeding and selling chickens whose eggs were prized for their rich yolks. Central City slowly changed too. New people moved in, some of them more open-minded than the older residents. The Chinese population grew as more workers came to the mines, and they formed a tight-knit community that supported each other. Gradually, Isaac and Rose found themselves less isolated, more accepted, though there were always some who would never approve of their marriage. They did not care as much anymore. They had proven that their love was real and lasting, that the family they had built was strong and good. They had proven that grace was not something doled out by churches or communities, but something that lived in the hearts of people brave enough to offer it to each other. When Gabriel was 5 and Anna was 3, Rose gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Samuel and Matthew. The house was suddenly very full and very loud, and Isaac often joked that they had achieved Rose's dream of a house full of children sooner than expected. The 4 children grew up surrounded by love and the beauty of the Colorado wilderness. Gabriel was serious and thoughtful, always the protective older brother. Anna was wild and adventurous, climbing trees and riding horses almost before she could walk. Samuel was gentle and artistic, always drawing or building things. Matthew was the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile. As they grew, Isaac and Rose made sure their children understood their heritage. Rose taught them Spanish and told them stories about their grandmother who had crossed the border with nothing but courage and love. Isaac taught them about resilience and second chances, about how sometimes the most important thing you could do was offer kindness to someone who needed it. The children faced some prejudice as they grew older, especially when they started attending the school in Central City. There were always a few kids who parroted their parents' bigotry, calling Gabriel and his siblings names or refusing to play with them. But Isaac and Rose had raised their children to be strong and proud of who they were, and the O'Connor children learned to stand up for themselves and each other. Mr. Davis passed away when Gabriel was 8, leaving his small ranch to Isaac and Rose in his will. It was an unexpected gift, and it brought tears to both their eyes. He had been like a father to Isaac and a grandfather to their children, and his loss was deeply felt. They incorporated his land into their own, expanding the O'Connor ranch even further. Mrs. Patterson retired and came to live with them, taking over one of the bedrooms they had added to the house. She had never married or had children of her own, and she had long considered Isaac, Rose, and their children to be her family. She spent her days cooking enormous meals, spoiling the children, and regaling them with stories of the early days when Isaac and Rose first fell in love. The Wang family remained close friends, and as their children grew up alongside the O'Connor children, deep bonds formed. Gabriel eventually married the Wang's daughter, May, in a beautiful ceremony that blended traditions from both families. It was held on the O'Connor ranch, under the same cottonwood tree where Isaac had first prayed with Rose, which they had transplanted to their property years earlier as a reminder of where it all began. Anna grew up to be a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch where she taught not just reading and writing, but also tolerance and acceptance. Samuel became a carpenter, building homes throughout the county that were known for their beauty and craftsmanship. Matthew took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, proving to have a natural talent for ranching that made Isaac proud. As Isaac and Rose grew older, their hair turning gray and their faces becoming lined with age, they would often sit on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching their grandchildren play in the yard. They had 9 grandchildren eventually, a rambunctious group that kept everyone on their toes. "Did you ever imagine," Rose asked one evening when she was 62 and Isaac was 64, "that this is where we would end up, with all this?" She gestured at the ranch, at the house that had been expanded so many times it barely resembled the original 3-room cabin at their children and grandchildren. "No," Isaac admitted. "When I rode into Central City that day, I was so lonely I could barely stand it. I had given up on the idea that I would ever have a home or a family. I was just existing, not really living." "And then you saw me at the church," Rose said. "And then I saw you," Isaac agreed. "And something in me knew even then that you were the answer to everything I had been searching for. I did not know it would lead to all this, but I knew you were important. You gave me grace that day," Rose said. "You helped me believe that I was worthy of love and acceptance when I had almost given up believing it. You changed my entire life in that moment." "We changed each other's lives," Isaac said. "We gave each other the grace we both needed, and we built something beautiful out of it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. From inside the house came the sounds of their family, children laughing, someone playing the piano that Rose had bought years ago, the clatter of dishes being washed. "I would do it all again," Rose said suddenly. "Every hard moment, every bit of prejudice we faced, every struggle. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." Isaac raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "So would I. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rose O'Connor. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." "And it is not over yet," Rose said with a smile. "We still have years ahead of us." They did have several more years, years filled with more grandchildren and the satisfaction of seeing their children succeed and build happy lives of their own. Years of running the ranch and watching it continue to prosper. Years of quiet evenings on the porch and busy family dinners, and all the small moments that make up a life well lived. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, with Rose beside him as she had been for over 40 years. Rose lived another 5 years after that, surrounded by the family they had built together, before joining him. They were buried side by side on their ranch, beneath a simple stone that read Isaac and Rose O'Connor. Together they found grace. Their children and grandchildren kept the ranch going, passing it down through the generations. The story of how Isaac and Rose met, how a lonely cowboy had stopped to help a woman turned away from church, and offered her prayer and dignity when others offered only judgment, became a family legend. It was told to each new generation as a reminder of the power of compassion, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the transformative nature of love. The cottonwood tree they had transplanted from town, the tree beneath which they had first prayed together, grew massive and strong over the decades. It became a gathering place for the family, a spot where weddings were held and children played, and people came to remember Isaac and Rose and the legacy they had left behind. Because in the end, that first moment when a lonely cowboy had seen a woman in pain and decided to offer her grace had rippled outward like waves in a pond, touching countless lives and creating something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. They had taken their loneliness and transformed it into love, had faced down prejudice with dignity and courage, had built a family and a home and a life that proved that grace, real grace, was always worth fighting for. And somewhere in the endless Colorado sky, two souls who had found each other on a dusty street in Central City continued their journey together, their hands still clasped, their love eternal, a testament to the power of one small act of kindness on a Sunday morning long ago.